Hello and welcome back. I'm Piece Arts and today we'll be learning about ZBrush. So if you open the ZBrush, you will be met with this screen. And if you're trying to draw, you're gonna get something like this. So this is basically not a 3D view. And what I recommend you to do is open up your lightbox. You can have it in here. Or if you have her, you can see the shortcut is comma. So you can press your comma key on your keyboard and in the project section, choose one of these preset projects. This is the fastest way to start working and I feel like the best way. So on some of these you can see the number and this is the resolution. So if you like to work on a bit lower resolution of spheres, you can choose this one, and a bit higher you can choose this one. As well as on some of them you can see that the material is a bit different. Dynamesh is as well gonna be, you just cannot see the number. So let's start by choosing maybe a bit higher number one and just press no because we don't want to save this doodle we did. And you are gonna be met with the screen. In the subtools, this is where all your models will be staying. So now, before we start, let's learn about navigation. Navigation can be a very difficult thing for a beginner in ZBrush, but I think it's pretty simple. So, you can navigate by pressing your left key on the canvas and rotating. If you're pressing on a model with your left key, you'll be drawing. So I usually recommend you to not navigate with the left mouse key, but using the right mouse key. And our right mouse key will rotate a bit differently, but you can rotate even while you have your model hovered. Now, for moving your model, you'll have to hold Alt. So just hold Alt and right click. And if you want to scale it up or down, you will have to hold Alt. Press your right click so you can start dragging the model and just release the Alt, but still keep holding your right mouse. And you will be scaling. So this is basically how I do it. Now, if by any chance you lose your model, you have to press F on your keyboard or here, the frame wheel. If you hover, you can see the shortcut. Let's position it. Actually, if you press F a few times when you have more models, it will change how it frames the model. But in this case, this is good. Now, ZBrush actually has two ways of navigating. One is global, another one is local. The global one is more like the Blender. So if you're a Blender user, maybe you're gonna like a global one more. You can change it in your transform menu here, and there is local. If you turn off, it will be global. So you can test out which one you like more. So what does it mean local or global? Local means that it's gonna locally rotate from where your mouse is hovering. So let's turn on local. And if my mouse is here, it's gonna rotate in that option. It's very visible when we're close to model. It's rotating around that point, which I have hovered. Now, I usually recommend you using the local one, but if you're like global one, there's nothing wrong with that. You can use global. Now, for starting to draw, we're gonna be pressing B, and B is for brush. And I'm usually using all these shortcuts for getting my brushes. And I think that the shortcuts are very intuitive and easy to understand. So let's say I want to get clay buildup, which is usually mostly used brush in ZBrush and in Blender. So I press B for brush, C for clay, and B for buildup. And you can see in here we have our clay buildup brush. And just by left mouse key or drawing on their tablet, you can start drawing on your mesh. The S is for size, or I said scale of the brush, but it's size, draw size of your brush. As well, your brush have a focal shift, but you shouldn't be worrying about this one for now. The only thing when you would be worried about it is when you have a grab brush. Grab brush is B, M, and V. Let me just find here, V. And if by accident your focal shift will be at the 100, you'll see that your grab brush will do something like this. So this is the only time when you have to worry about the focal shift. Now, let's learn the brushes we'll need. So we know B, C, B, which is for clay buildup, B, M, and V for the move brush. These ones are the main brushes. Now for creasing, we'll use B, D, and S, which stands for dam started. So D for dam and S for standard. B, D, S. Let's get our draw size a bit smaller with S. And we can start sharpening. Now, if you want to have an opposite effect with your brush, what you will have to do is hold Alt and draw on a mesh. So let's say we have a clay buildup. We hold Alt, it's gonna carve in the mesh. If you hold Shift, it's going to be smoothing. As well, if you hold Shift, you can see that your intensity and focal length changes. Because when you hold Shift, you can see it even shows the smooth brush is active. If you release, it disappears. So let's move it. You can even hold Alt with the smooth brush, but it's gonna do a weird thing. Okay, so we're gonna have main brushes. Now, another thing you might want is let's go to B, D, S for dam started, and in the stroke options, there is a lazy mouse option. There's only two things you have to be worrying about is lazy step and lazy radius. I usually recommend you to worry only about lazy radius, and it is how much the stroke will be smoothed. And you will have this weird line following your mouse and smoothing your strokes. So the higher number you put on your lazy radius, the longer the red line will be and the more smooth your brush will be. So let's set it a bit smaller, and lazy step is, if I make it bigger, you can see what it does. It just makes steps when I draw. Let's lower it a bit so you can see it better. You can see it makes steps. And if we have it a bit pretty close, it's gonna become a line. Okay. So if you wanna add, let's say, more spheres or cylinders, what you can do is press B, and there is a primitive brush, which will be I, and you can insert even body parts and all of these things. You can insert primitives and choose from these ones. And when you choose, just drag in your canvas and you'll get it in the same subtool. Now, you not always want to do this. Maybe you want to have a separate subtool. So what you can do is append or insert. I usually use append and choose from one of these. Let's choose the cylinder And now we can navigate through my subtools and press on my cylinder. There is transform tools, which are very useful in ZBrush. They are here at the top. So draw, what we usually have is for drawing on a mesh. Okay, let's change to the brush, clay buildup. So we usually have it on the draw. There is move, scale, rotate. But usually it doesn't matter which one you choose when you have a gizmo on. So when you have a gizmo on, you have everything here. Your rotate, move, and scale. Use this corners for moving your mesh freely. If you want to have it locked in an axis, you can use these small arrows. For scaling, you have these cube shape-like forms. If you want to scale everything together, there's big yellow cube here. And for rotation, these rings. So we can rotate here, here. You can see another axis appears when I rotate it. Now, if you change everything, there's really no way of resetting the position of your thing. So if you rotate it, it's gonna stay that way. Now, you can reset your gizmo position by holding Alt and drawing on a mesh. I usually hold Alt and then press Shift to have it stuck and have it snap on the right ways. And now we can move it again. You don't really need to use gizmo, and you can use this transpose line, but it's probably very difficult to understand for the beginners. But if you have a bit older version of ZBrush, which you should update, you'll probably have only this one. What you will have to do is from all of these in the center, there's a white one. You have to press on this one and you can move it. If you have the scale one, you'll scale it and rotate it. Rotation is a bit different. So maybe stay with the gizmo. It's much more comfortable for beginners, and even for experts, there's a lot of options on here. So you can choose from all of these things. They can be very difficult to understand sometimes. So they do what they are written. Let's say we want to inflate the thing. We get these arrows, which can be very confusing to understand. But if you just try it out, you can see what they do, as well as these ones. You can see if I make the line full, whole object is inflating or deflating. So let's not wait for anything and try to maybe make a head shape with a few of the hairs. So let me just delete the cylinder and append a new one. This one is going to be our neck. So by any chance you don't see two dots on the mesh, you probably have your symmetry off. You can toggle your symmetry by pressing X on your keyboard, or here, activate your symmetry. Usually it's on X, and I'm not really sure I should talk about all of these ones, but you can even have all of them on. If you want to have a strange effect, let's now remember that it changes from the object. So if you want mess up one object, just make sure you're working on another one differently. So we can see, we can have changing it at the top and bottom and even on the sides at the same time. But X is usually how it is. Okay, so what we're gonna do now, I'm gonna press W to go into the move. If you have a, you can see, move is W, scale is E, and R is for rotation. But usually if you're using the gizmo, W is enough for you to know. What I'm gonna do is drag it down, the big square, scale it down, and rotate it to the side. If you can see, I'm locking my view, and if you're using your right click, you're moving your camera and you want to lock this on this view, you have to hold Shift and release your mouse and release your Shift. And this is how you lock the camera in. Okay, let's rotate it a bit, scale it, and maybe scale it down. We can add few subdivisions, and you can do that with the shortcut holding Ctrl and pressing D. And now you'll have few subdivisions. Where can you see your subdivisions is in your geometry. Here is your subdivisions. So I pressed Ctrl D 4 times. This is how many I get. You can delete the subdivision if you don't want. So let's say I want only 3. You can delete higher. If you want 2, you can delete higher and you only have these 2. Now, there's a quick way of navigating through your objects, and it's Alt and left mouse clicking on the object. And you can see that it switches through subtools. So Alt click on my head and BMV for the move brush. As for scaling the brush, and let's get something similar to the head shape. You can see how many points you have on the top here, and you can see the wireframe if you press Shift F, or you can use just this one. And if you feel like you have too much, you can go to your geometry and do a few things. One is Zero Mesh, and another one is Dynamesh. Dynamesh is a bit better for beginning the scope, and Zero Mesh when you're finishing with the scope. And if you want to apply it, what you have to do is hold Ctrl, drag with your left click, and release. It will activate it. Let's try it again, but this time I'm gonna draw a big one where you can see a lot of mess in a mesh. Ctrl, left click, drag, release. And you can see that it added more points. Now, by any chance you Ctrl, left click and drag on the mesh, it's going to be masking the mesh. And Ctrl, dragging again. Now it's not gonna Dynamesh, but it's gonna remove the mask, if you can see. Of course, Ctrl Z for backing up your history, and at the top you have whole history of your model, so you can even go back to the sphere like. But let's just go back here because we have one problem. We made this mess on the model, and now how should I get rid of this mess? First, let's learn a bit more about the masking. So if you're holding Ctrl and dragging on the mesh, you can see that it's gonna be drawing the mask. If you're holding Ctrl and dragging on your canvas, you can see that you have a box selection mask. And if you're holding Ctrl, you can choose from which method you want to use on this stroke option. So usually the lasso is the main one. Let's go into the side view and let's use the lasso tool to mask this. Now, there's a grouping options in ZBrush, which is a very strong tool. You can find them in polygroups, but usually we are using a shortcut, and a shortcut is Ctrl W. So let's press Ctrl W, but wait. Let's turn on polyframe, and you can see everything is one group. Now let's press Ctrl and W, and you can see that the mask part becomes another group. This is from mask group from masking. This is what we do. So if you want to press, you can press this one, or just use the shortcut Ctrl W. Now I want to get rid of this group. We will be holding Ctrl and Shift, and Ctrl Shift is basically the hiding tool. Let's say we want to have only this one. And if you want to hide the thing you're selecting, you will have to hold 3 buttons, which is Ctrl, Shift, and Alt. You'll have a red box now, and it's gonna hide the parts which you drag. If you wanna unhide everything, you press Ctrl, Shift, and click. Now, by any chance you wanna invert the hidden parts, you have to hold Ctrl, Shift, and not click, but drag. It's gonna invert, and let's just unhide everything. Now, when you have more than one group, what you can do is Shift and Ctrl and click on one of these groups, and it's gonna hide all of the other groups. Now, I want to delete this group, which we don't need. Scroll a bit down into the geometry options, and in a modify topology, there is a choice to delete hidden. So let's delete hidden. And now it happened. If we try to unhide, nothing happens. So we need to close this hole. What can we do? It's pretty easy if you have your Dynamesh already active. So we just do the operation to Dynamesh. If you forgot how to do it, just Ctrl, click, and drag on a canvas. You can do it a few times. You can see your history is moving. That means you're applying. Okay, let's move by holding Shift. And let's hide our poly. We can use another brush, which is good for holding your mesh a bit more polished. It's B, H, and P, and it stands for high polish. So H for high and P for polish. There's actually few tools to smooth out the mesh, polish the mesh. Another one is B, T, and A or D as trim dynamic. And you can see it flatten up the mesh. Now, maybe at this point we are hitting this view, how we see our model. So what you can do is hold space, and here you have your quick setup menu, or in here you can change our material. Most basic one is basic material, this one. This is probably the most used and most known material in ZBrush. So maybe let's stay up with it. Okay, let's move it out a bit, our mesh, and use our trim dynamic. Okay, let's say we're happy with our head. And let's quickly learn a few things about how to make here. So what I'm going to do is duplicate our cylinder, press on a move, turn off the symmetry, which is X, and let's move. Now maybe let's scale it because we want a longer, we want a longer here, but maybe a bit flatter. So let's flatten it up. Let's flatten it up on this side too. And in here we have a really strong tool, which I want even the beginners to learn, is bend curve. Now you're probably gonna be met with the subdivisions, and most of these tools cannot be used with subdivisions, and a lot of tools in ZBrush cannot be used with subdivisions. So what you're gonna do is go in your geometry and just delete the subdivisions. And now we can use any of these and a lot of other tools. So let's bend curve. And you can see we have these 2 points. Now I'm not really sure about all of these choices, so you'll have to test it out, but it's pretty easy because there's not too much things you can test out. So what I'm gonna do is draw this one, and you can see there's more dots appearing. If I draw this one, that we don't see a big difference. Let's keep it full out. If you drag this one, we can see the dot changes the position from the vertical to horizontal. What you can do with these dots is actually position. And this is a very great tool for making here, or even forming some of difficult shapes. So let's form over here. And let's press this back and maybe use inflate brush. And at the bottom, I want here to become slimmer. Let's inflate them to become smaller at the strand. And let's press Q to go back into drawing mode. I'm going to just smooth it out. There's actually a way to duplicate a bit quicker and have it in the same subtool. What you're gonna do is choose move or W for shortcut. Let's go back from this view into Gizmo. And let's go into the site and hold Ctrl while dragging. If you did that, you can see what you got a new object. And let's place it. Let's do it again. The only problem with this is everything gonna be the same group. So let's unhide it by Ctrl left click drag. Maybe we wanna group this as the separate groups. So if you wanna group everything in a different groups, what you have to do is go into your group options, poly groups, and at the top there's auto group. So if you press everything, you're gonna have a separate group. You can quickly utilize your groups by having a Gizmo tool, holding your Ctrl and clicking on one of the groups. If you can see it masking other objects. And let's go back into the drawing, BMV for move brush, and move our here into the position. Let's go back into Gizmo, Ctrl click, draw, and move our here. Okay, so that's basically all you have to know for working in ZBrush as a beginner. Thank you all for watching and see you in the next one.